The morning sun glittered across the lake, each ripple catching light like shards of glass. Daniel Carter leaned against his Harley, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug. This lake wasn't just water, it was his sanctuary. His father had bought the land decades ago, and Daniel had grown up swimming, fishing, and watching sunsets here. Now, as an adult, it was his last tether to peace after years of construction work and stress. The tranquility didn't last. The rhythmic crunch of sandals on gravel broke the silence. Karen Whitfield, head of the Millstone Ridge HOA, marched forward with a folder clutched like a weapon. Her floral blouse swayed in the breeze, and the pearls around her neck gleamed with each confident step. "Daniel," she called, voice sharp, almost triumphant. "We need to talk about the lake." Daniel sighed. He'd heard rumors of Karen's crusade to regulate community standards, but the lake was different. It wasn't community property, it was his. "Morning, Karen. If you're here to fish, I'll charge you a fee," he joked, masking irritation. Karen didn't smile. She opened the folder, revealing crisp papers stamped with the HOA logo. "You're in violation. Swimming, boating, and personal use of this lake are subject to HOA rules. Effective immediately, you're fined $10,000. The words hit like a slap. Daniel set his mug down slowly, eyes narrowing. $10,000 for using my own lake." Karen's smirk widened. "Rules are rules. Pay up, or we escalate." Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle in his chest. The lake sparkled behind him, but the calm surface couldn't hide the storm brewing inside him. This wasn't about water. It was about control, and Daniel wasn't going to give it up. The paper snapped in the wind as Karen held it up, relishing the authority in her hand. "You can read it yourself," she said smugly, tapping a manicured finger against the fine amount. $10,000. Non-negotiable. Daniel took the paper, scanning each line. The legal jargon was thick, designed to intimidate. "Section 4B, Clause 7, he read aloud, his voice flat. "Unauthorized use of shared water resources." He looked up, incredulous. "This isn't shared. It's mine." Karen's lips curled. "Property lines can be interpreted. The HOA board agreed last night." Daniel's chest tightened, but his expression remained steady. He knew better than to give Karen the satisfaction of an outburst. He folded the paper with care and slid it into his back pocket. "Noted," he said. Karen blinked, thrown off by his calm. "Excuse me. I said noted. But let me be clear, Karen. You can throw around your rules, your board meetings, and your ridiculous fines. But you're stepping onto my land, and you're trying to tell me I can't swim in the lake my father dug with his own hands." His voice dropped lower, deliberate. "That's not going to end the way you think." Karen stiffened, pearls glinting against the sunlight. She clutched her folder tighter, but her smirk returned. "We'll see." With that, she turned, sandals crunching against gravel as she strode back toward her SUV parked on the street. Daniel stood still, the warm breeze ruffling his shirt. The fine was real, the threat was real, but so was his resolve. He wouldn't just fight this. He'd turn it back on her. Carl Benson had seen enough battles, both overseas and in this neighborhood, to know when a fight was brewing. Leaning against his battered Ford pickup, he watched Karen's SUV roll away, her floral blouse fluttering like a flag of arrogance through the window. "Trouble?" he asked, voice gravelly but calm. Daniel glanced up, holding out the fine notice like a bad joke. Carl squinted at the paper, his weathered face tightening with each line he read. 10 grand? For swimming? That's robbery, son." Daniel exhaled, running a hand through his short hair. "She says the board approved it. Calls it a shared water resource." Carl snorted, spitting into the gravel. "I was here before half these houses even existed. That lake. Your old man Sweat built it. Don't let her rewrite history." The word struck a chord. Daniel remembered his father hauling rocks, clearing mud, working with bare hands to shape the water's edge. Every dive Daniel had taken as a kid carried that legacy. "I won't," Daniel said firmly. Carl gave a half-smile beneath his gray mustache. "Good. Because with Karen, once you give an inch, she'll take the whole damn neighborhood." Daniel nodded, the fine still burning in his pocket like a hot coal. He knew Karen wouldn't stop. She'd push harder, maybe drag him to court, maybe try to shame him in front of the neighbors. But Daniel wasn't about to be her victim. Carl clapped him on the shoulder. "Whatever you decide, I got your back." Daniel's eyes lingered on the calm water of the lake, glowing gold in the setting sun. He made a silent vow then. If Karen wanted war, he'd fight with everything he had, and make her regret starting it. The soft glow of the living room lamp did little to ease the weight pressing down on Daniel's shoulders. He stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at the fine notice he had unfolded again. The paper looked harmless enough, but the bold $10,000 figure printed in the middle might as well have been written in fire. Emma glanced up from her phone, her brow furrowed. "I saw Karen's car outside earlier. What did she want?" Daniel hesitated, then handed her the notice. Her eyes widened as she read. 10,000? For the lake? She's insane. She's power-hungry, Daniel corrected. And she's using the HOA to push me around. Emma set the phone aside, her ponytail swinging as she leaned forward. "You can't just let this slide, Dan. If you pay, she'll think she owns you. Next time it'll be something worse. Your bike, your garage, even this house." Daniel sat down heavily in the armchair, rubbing his temples. "I know, but fighting her, it won't be easy. She's got the board, the bylaws, the money. All I've got is a stubborn streak." Emma smirked despite the tension. "That stubborn streak is exactly why you'll win. Dad didn't build that lake for some HOA president to steal. It's part of who we are." Her words stirred something deep inside him. He remembered swimming with Emma as kids, racing to the dock, laughing under the summer sun. That lake wasn't just land. It was memory, heritage, freedom. Daniel looked at his sister, her hoodie bunched around her elbows, her sneakers tapping nervously against the carpet. He straightened in his chair. "You're right. If she wants a fight, I'll give her one. But I won't just stop her, Emma. I'll make her wish she never tried." The HOA meeting hall buzzed with chatter, folding chairs creaking under the weight of curious neighbors. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the long table where Karen presided like royalty. Papers spread before her. Her floral blouse seemed louder than the voices in the room, and the pearls around her neck reflected the light with calculated precision. Daniel stood at the podium, his calloused hands gripping the wood firmly. He scanned the room, recognizing faces he had grown up with, neighbors who had once swum in the lake with him. Now many avoided his gaze, their loyalty swayed by HOA fear-mongering. Karen tapped her folder with a manicured nail, commanding silence. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice honeyed but sharp, "the board has already voted. You are in violation. The fine stands." Daniel's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, his voice carrying through the hall. "That lake was my father's before any of you lived here. It's my land, my water, my right. No board, no vote, no neighbor has the authority to take that away." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others looked uncomfortable. Karen smiled coldly. "You may appeal, but I assure you, the outcome will not change. The rules are clear." Daniel stepped back, his heart pounding, but his resolve unshaken. "Then I'll make my own rules. You've crossed a line, Karen, and you'll regret it." The tension thickened, neighbors whispering as Karen's smug smile faltered just slightly. Daniel left the podium, the fine notice still burning in his pocket. He didn't know yet how he would fight back, but the fire in his chest told him one thing. This war had only begun. Daniel tightened the bolts on his Harley, the hum of the ratchet soothing his thoughts. The lake shimmered behind him, a reminder of everything at stake. Each time he looked at it, he saw his father's legacy, his childhood, and his future tied together in rippling water. Across the street, voices carried over. Karen stood with two HOA board members, gesturing toward the lake like it was a crime scene. Her floral blouse fluttered in the breeze as she stabbed her finger in Daniel's direction, her pearls bobbing with each sharp word. Daniel caught fragments: rules, enforcement, liability. The board members nodded, their faces heavy with concern. One scribbled notes while the other adjusted his glasses, avoiding Daniel's gaze. Emma stepped out of the house, hoodie sleeves pushed up. "They're planning something," she muttered, following Daniel's line of sight. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag. Yeah, she's rallying the troops. Emma frowned. She wants you isolated. If the board stands with her, she'll bury you in paperwork and fines until you cave. Daniel exhaled slowly. Let her try. Still, the unease gnawed at him. Karen wasn't just pushing a fine anymore. She was turning the neighborhood against him. Each whisper, each nod, chipped away at his standing. But Daniel wasn't alone. Emma squeezed his shoulder, grounding him. He looked back at the Harley, then at the lake. The HOA might have rules and signatures, but he had history, grit, and stubborn resolve. As Karen's voice rose again, Daniel muttered under his breath. If it's war she wants, she's about to see how I fight. Night settled over Millstone Ridge, but the battle lines were still drawn. Daniel sat in the armchair, elbows resting on his knees, staring at Emma's glowing phone screen. She scrolled through an HOA forum, the digital battleground where Karen had been laying her traps. Listen to this, Emma said, reading aloud. Residents deserve protection from reckless use of shared resources. Certain individuals think they're above the law. She flicked her finger. And here's another. If rules aren't enforced, our property values will plummet. Daniel clenched his jaw. She's framing me as the threat. Emma nodded. And she's got half the neighborhood agreeing with her. Look at the comments. People are actually thanking her for taking a stand. Daniel leaned back, running a hand over his face. He wasn't just fighting Karen anymore. He was fighting perception. Every post she made turned him into the villain of his own community. But then Emma smiled, sly and determined. Here's the thing. She's sloppy. She mentioned budget changes and fee increases in a thread. That means she's already planning to raise dues to cover her little crusade. If you catch her in the act. Daniel's eyes lit up. I could turn it on her. Emma nodded firmly. Exactly. Use her own greed against her. The glow of the phone lit Daniel's face as his mind spun with possibilities. Karen wanted him boxed in by rules, but she had exposed her hand. For the first time that day, Daniel allowed himself a smile. If Karen was careless enough to reveal her schemes online, he'd make sure the whole neighborhood saw it, and make her choke on her own rules. The HOA hall was packed tighter than Daniel had ever seen. Folding chairs scraped the floor as neighbors crammed in, murmuring like restless bees. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and cold. At the front, Karen stood tall, paper in hand like a decree. This community must protect its resources, she declared, her voice sharp and rehearsed. The lake cannot be monopolized by one individual. That is why the fine must stand. The board members beside her nodded dutifully, pens poised, eyes down. They weren't leading, they were following. Daniel sat near the front row, arms folded, every muscle in his body tight with restraint. Neighbors stole glances at him, some with sympathy, others with suspicion. He could hear whispers, 10,000 is steep. But what if she's right? The rules say. Karen basked in the attention, pearls gleaming under the lights. We must think of property values, safety, and fairness. If Mr. Carter continues this reckless behavior, the entire neighborhood will pay the price. That was Daniel's breaking point. He stood, his chair scraping loudly. The whispers hushed. You want to talk about fairness? Daniel's voice carried through the hall. That lake has been in my family since before this HOA existed. My father built it with his bare hands. And now you want to rewrite history so you can pad your budget? Karen's smile twitched. She held her paper higher. The board has spoken. Daniel stepped forward, eyes blazing. Then let the whole neighborhood see where their money is really going. How much of those budget changes are for the lake, and how much are for you? The room erupted in gasps and chatter. For the first time, Karen's confidence wavered. Daniel had struck a nerve. The night was cool, the hum of crickets filling the silence. Daniel stood in his driveway under the orange glow of the streetlight, a folder tucked under his arm. Inside were printed screenshots, Karen's careless posts, her budget talk, her threats. Carl Benson leaned against his old Ford, cigarette glowing between two fingers. His flannel shirt was faded, the brim of his Vietnam vet cap shadowing his eyes. So, she's been digging her own grave, huh? He muttered after skimming a page. Daniel nodded. Emma caught it on the HOA forum. She's talking about raising dues by 5,000. Says it's to cover legal disputes, which basically means me. Carl chuckled darkly. The one thing people hate more than fines is higher fees. If you show the neighborhood she's bleeding them dry, they'll turn on her, Daniel finished. Carl flicked ash into the gravel. Exactly. Folks don't care about lakes or bylaws, son. They care about their wallets. Hit her there. Daniel looked past Carl, the lake shimmering faintly in the moonlight. His fists clenched around the folder. Karen thought she could frame him as the enemy, but soon the truth would surface. Carl took one last drag and crushed the cigarette under his boot. You ready to bring this fight into the open? Daniel met his eyes, steady and determined. I was born ready. The two men stood in silence, the weight of the coming battle pressing down. The neighborhood slept, unaware of the storm brewing. But when it hit, it wouldn't be Daniel who got washed away. The sun was high, casting sharp reflections across the water. A dozen neighbors gathered in the backyard of the Millers, their lawn chairs clustered in a semicircle. Tension hung in the humid air as Karen took center stage, gesturing wildly with her manicured hands. We cannot allow this kind of selfish behavior, she insisted, her pearls catching the light. If Mr. Carter refuses to comply, we will be forced to increase HOA dues to cover the legal fallout. None of us want that. A ripple of discontent spread through the group. A mother in a sundress frowned. A man in a ball cap muttered to his wife. People shifted uneasily, calculating what 5,000 more a year would mean for their mortgages. Daniel and Emma stood at the edge, listening. Finally, Daniel stepped forward, holding the folder. Emma flanked him, eyes sharp. Funny thing, Daniel said, his voice steady. Karen's right about dues going up. But what she's not telling you is that it's her idea. She's already planning to raise everyone's fees by $5,000. Not for safety, not for fairness, just to cover her war against me. Gasps erupted. Emma held up printed screenshots. Here, straight from her posts. She's bleeding you dry to feed her grudge. Karen's face flushed, her smirk faltering. Those are taken out of context. But the crowd wasn't buying it. Neighbors leaned in, muttering louder. One man shouted, 5,000? Are you kidding me? Another shook his head. This is robbery. Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. I'll fight for my lake. But you deserve to know who's really draining your pockets. Karen's composure cracked, sweat glistening on her forehead as her grip on control began to slip. The sun dipped low, throwing long golden shadows across Millstone Ridge. Daniel leaned casually against his Harley, arms folded, his eyes fixed on Karen across the street. She was pacing near her driveway, clutching her phone like a lifeline, her voice shrill enough that the entire neighborhood could hear. The words unauthorized use of the lake and violation of community rules carried easily on the breeze. Neighbors had begun filtering out of their homes, gathering on porches and lawns. They weren't coming to help her. No, their faces told a different story. Curiosity, suspicion, even quiet amusement. Karen had always lorded over them, waving the HOA bylaws like a weapon. But now, with Daniel standing calm and unyielding, something was shifting. She pointed her finger at him, her blonde bob swinging with every furious shake of her head. You think you can defy me? She screeched. Daniel didn't move. His stillness was louder than her rage, and it unsettled her. Then, deliberately, he raised his voice, not shouting, but firm enough to silence the murmurs around him. You find me for swimming in my own lake. You thought you could bury me in paperwork. But tonight, he paused, locking eyes with Karen, everyone here is going to see the truth. A ripple of unease ran through the crowd. Karen froze, her phone halfway to her ear. For the first time, the smug certainty on her face faltered. Daniel pushed off the bike and stepped forward, not with anger, but with confidence. The climax was beginning, and Karen knew it. The meeting hall buzzed with tension. Every chair was filled. Neighbors had shown up in droves, drawn by whispers of what Daniel had uncovered. At the podium, Daniel set his laptop down and clicked a button. A chart appeared on the projector screen, casting blue light across the faces of the room. This, Daniel said, his voice calm but cutting, is where your money has been going. Gasps rippled through the audience. The chart displayed inflated maintenance fees, unexplained special projects, and line items that seemed to exist only on paper. Karen shifted in her seat, her pearl necklace trembling with emotion. She forced a laugh. This is nonsense. Fabricated by someone with a grudge. But Daniel was ready. He tapped another key, and scanned invoices appeared, each bearing Karen's signature. Every dollar was taken from your pockets, he continued, his eyes never leaving the crowd. Not for the neighborhood, not for the lake, but for her. Neighbors leaned forward, murmuring. One man stood, red-faced. You mean we've been paying for her vacations? Her house upgrades. Karen shot up from her chair. Out of order. This is completely out of order. But Daniel spoke over her, louder now, each word landing like a hammer. You fine me $10,000 for stepping into my own lake. But tonight, I show you all how she's been stepping into your wallets. The room erupted, voices shouting, fists pounding tables. Karen raised her hands in protest, but her voice was drowned out. For once, she wasn't in control. And Daniel, standing firm at the podium, knew the scales had tipped. Karen slammed both hands on the table, her voice breaking as she shouted. This is a smear campaign, lies and fabrications. Her face was flushed, her hands trembling. The Karen that usually projected icy control was unraveling before everyone's eyes. Daniel didn't flinch. He leaned slightly over the podium, speaking in measured tones. The documents are here for anyone to see. I've made copies. I'll happily distribute them after this meeting. Murmurs grew louder. Neighbors shifted uneasily, trading glances. Some were already pulling out phones, snapping photos of the screen. Karen tried again, desperate. You don't understand what it takes to run this community. There are expenses you can't comprehend. Daniel cut her off smoothly. Expenses like a $5,000 consultation for a landscaping project that never happened? Or the $3,200 labeled as lake maintenance during a season when the lake was fenced off and untouched? Gasps followed. Someone shouted, "We trusted you, Karen." The weight of the room pressed down on her. For years, she had bullied, manipulated, and twisted rules to her will. But tonight, the tide was turning. Her words, once gospel, now rang hollow. Daniel straightened, meeting the eyes of the crowd. You find me, but I wasn't the only victim. Every family here has been paying for her schemes. And I won't stop until she's held accountable. Karen opened her mouth again, but no sound came out. The silence that followed wasn't for her. It was for Daniel, the man who had finally broken her facade. After the meeting adjourned in chaos, neighbors spilled onto the street, their voices animated. Daniel found himself surrounded, his Harley gleaming under the street lamps. Men and women leaned in, their faces etched with outrage but also relief. You did the right thing, one neighbor said, clapping him on the shoulder. We've all had enough of her. Another woman added, she fined me for planting roses that weren't approved colors. We never thought we could fight back. Daniel nodded, his arms crossed. She thrived on fear, on making you think you didn't have a choice. But the truth's out now, you do. Behind them, Karen stood at her driveway, her phone dangling uselessly at her side. For once, she wasn't barking orders or waving papers. She was still, isolated, the power slipping from her grip like water through her fingers. Daniel caught her eye across the street. For a brief second, he saw not a tyrant, but a woman realizing she had lost everything she had built on intimidation. He didn't gloat, didn't smile, just turned back to the crowd. We're not done yet, he told them. The money she took, it needs to be paid back. And the system she built to protect herself? That's coming down too. The group murmured in agreement. The street felt different tonight. Brighter, lighter. For the first time in years, the neighborhood wasn't under Karen's shadow. But Daniel knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. The final strike still remained. Karen sat alone at her dining table, the floral blouse wrinkled from the night's battle. Papers lay scattered across the polished wood surface, bylaws, invoices, and letters that once symbolized control. Now they were evidence. She held her head in her hands, her blonde bob shadowing her face. The house was quiet, oppressively so. No phone calls to command, no board members to bully into agreement. Just silence. Her mind replayed the evening in fragments, the gasps, the accusations, the betrayal in the eyes of neighbors she once dominated. She had built her throne on their fear, and Daniel had torn it down in a single night. A glass of wine sat untouched beside her. For once, she didn't have the appetite for victory, only the bitter taste of loss. In the distance, faint laughter drifted from outside, where neighbors still gathered around Daniel, their voices filled with hope. Each sound was a reminder that her reign was ending. Karen clenched her fists, her pride refusing to accept defeat. This isn't over, she told herself. It can't be over. But deep down, in the quiet honesty of her own kitchen, she knew it was slipping away. And Daniel wasn't finished yet. The final HOA meeting began with a heavy silence. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating rows of folding chairs filled with restless neighbors. Daniel stood at the podium again, this time not to expose, but to conclude. His hands held a thick stack of documents, proof, signatures, and votes collected over the past weeks. The board has reviewed the evidence, Daniel announced, his voice steady. The community has spoken. Effective immediately, Karen Whitfield is removed as HOA president. The words struck like thunder. The board members, seated stiffly beside her, nodded in unison. A murmur spread through the crowd, half disbelief, half relief. Karen sat rigid, arms folded tightly across her chest, her jaw clenched. For years she had commanded this room, demanded obedience. Now she was powerless, her authority stripped away with a single vote. Daniel placed the documents on the table before her. Transparency starts today. No more hidden fees, no more intimidation. Every resident deserves to live free of fear in their own homes. Applause erupted, tentative at first, then swelling until the hall echoed with it. Neighbors rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even shouting his name. Karen remained seated, her face pale. She refused to look at anyone, her hands gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles whitened. Daniel didn't gloat. He simply stepped back, letting the sound of the crowd wash over him. Justice had been done, not with vengeance, but with truth. The neighborhood looked different that morning, as if a fog had finally lifted. Daniel walked along the street, his boots crunching against the pavement. Everywhere he went, neighbors stopped him, shaking his hand, clapping him on the back, offering thanks. "Because of you, we can finally use the lake again," one father said, his young son perched on his shoulders. "My garden won't get fined anymore." Another woman laughed, wiping her eyes. "It feels like we got our homes back." Children ran across the lawns, their laughter carrying through the air. For once, there was no sense of fear that Karen might emerge with a clipboard to lecture them. The community breathed easier, freer. Daniel smiled, but he kept his words humble. "It wasn't just me. You all stood up. That's what made the difference." But everyone knew he had lit the spark. Without him, they might have continued living under Karen's rule for years. As the crowd gathered, someone brought up the subject of dues. Daniel explained calmly. "The fraudulent charges have been voided. Your fees are going back to normal. The money taken will be repaid." A cheer followed, louder than the first. From across the street, Karen's curtains twitched, a shadow moving inside. She hadn't shown her face since the vote. Daniel noticed, but he didn't linger on it. She had chosen isolation. The neighborhood had chosen unity. For the first time in years, Millstone Ridge felt like a community again, and Daniel knew they had crossed a point of no return. The lake shimmered beneath the sun, the water calm, unbroken, and inviting. Daniel stood at the edge, his reflection wavering gently on the surface. His motorcycle was parked just a few feet away, gleaming in the light. One by one, neighbors began arriving. Families with coolers, children dragging inflatable toys, couples carrying picnic baskets. Within minutes, the lakefront had transformed into something it hadn't been in years, a gathering place, alive with laughter and warmth. Daniel turned as a boy splashed into the shallows, his parents laughing nearby. "Feels good, doesn't it?" a man asked, clapping Daniel on the shoulder. "Better than good," Daniel replied with a grin. "Feels like home again. For so long, The lake had been Karen's symbol of control. The fences, the fines, the threats, all of it designed to remind the community who was in charge. Now, seeing children swim freely, neighbors smiling without fear, that power had been erased. Daniel crouched down, scooping a handful of cool water into his palm. It was more than just a lake now. It was proof. Proof that no one, not even Karen, could strip people of their right to live free. The sound of laughter carried across the water, and Daniel stood, satisfied. The battle was over, and the lake, his lake, belonged to the people again. As dusk settled over Millstone Ridge, the neighborhood glowed with life. Families lingered outside, children darted through sprinklers, and the sound of shared meals drifted from open patios. But Karen's house was silent. Her curtains were drawn, yet through a small gap, Daniel caught a glimpse as he walked by. Karen sat slumped at her table, her once pristine blouse wrinkled, her hair slightly disheveled. Her head rested on her hand, her gaze unfocused on the stack of papers before her. The woman who once dominated every meeting, who barked fines and threats with unshakable confidence, now looked small, fragile even. The community passed her by, no longer bound to her rules, no longer fearful of her wrath. Daniel paused, not out of pity, but out of reflection. He hadn't wanted revenge, only freedom. And as he watched her fade into irrelevance, he realized she had given herself the punishment. Stripped of control, ignored by those she once ruled, Karen was alone. A group of neighbors waved from across the street, drawing Daniel back into the moment. He raised a hand in return, then turned away from the window. The battle was done. Karen was history. The future belonged to those who had chosen courage over fear. The sun sank low, painting the sky in bands of gold and crimson. Daniel sat astride his Harley, parked at the lake's edge. The engine was quiet, but the polished chrome reflected the fading light like fire. Before him, the lake stretched wide and calm, the water glittering under the last rays of the day. Families lingered on the shore, children skipping stones, couples walking hand in hand, laughter carrying gently across the breeze. Daniel took it all in, the peace, the freedom, the sense of victory, not for him alone, but for everyone who had stood against fear. This lake, once chained by Karen's rules, now belonged wholly to the community. He thought back to the first fine, the arrogance in her eyes, the endless battles. It had felt impossible then. But now, with Karen dethroned and the neighborhood united, he realized something important. Tyranny always collapses when people find the courage to resist. The horizon glowed brighter for a moment, and Daniel smiled faintly. This wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. He revved the bike softly, the deep growl echoing across the water, then shut it off again. Tonight wasn't for riding. Tonight was for remembering what they had won. Behind him, neighbors waved, calling out his name with gratitude. Daniel lifted a hand in return, his silhouette framed against the glowing lake. The battle was over. Justice had been served, and Millstone Ridge was free. If you enjoyed this intense story, smash that like button and subscribe for more gripping, cinematic tales. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss the next thriller. Your support keeps these stories coming.